Hi, I'm Mark Allison. I'm a builder, flyer, and designer of indoor model airplanes. This video is created to introduce folks who are new to the Science Olympiad and the Propeller propulsion event, also called the Wright Stuff, W-R-I-G-H-T, in honor of the Wright brothers. This video is funded primarily by the National Free Flight Society and co-sponsored and produced by Bob Stalick and Jack Schaefer. I will demonstrate building a beginner's indoor model to familiarize you with the various materials, technical terms, construction techniques, flying skills, and competition strategies. The model that you'll see in this video conforms to the 2010 rules for this event. If you intend to build a couple of planes for competition, you'll need to check with your science instructor at your participating school in order to get the current rules. Kits and plans become available for each year's Science Olympiad. These are available from online indoor modeling suppliers. Some are simpler, more appropriate for beginners. Others are more complex and require more model building experience. We'll include in this video a list of simple tools, adhesives, and covering materials so that you can build and fly this and other models. We'll also include a list of resources and websites, as well as a glossary of terms and words that are special to aeromodeling. This is a completed version of the model that we're going to be building. It's one in a series that I call the Dragonfly, and it's designed to conform to the 2010 Science Olympiad rules and dimensions. I'm going to explain some of the parts, what they're named, so that when I refer to those again, you'll know what I'm talking about. Spars, this is a spar. This is also a spar. This spar is called the leading edge. This is the trailing edge. This is a rib. And if you look underneath, you can see this is a curved rib, and it's also called a sliced rib. The one on the end, I think you can see it better this way. This one here is a solid rib. Looking at the tail, or the stabilizer, this is a sliced rib, and it sits over a compression rib. And the compression rib just keeps the trailing edge and the leading edge separated, and it makes it a little bit stronger stabilizer. Looking at the rest of it, this is called the fuselage. It's also called the motor stick because it holds the motor. And that's actually the technical name for the rubber. In this case, it's a rubber motor. From this angle, you can see the rubber bands that are overlapping these two pieces here and here that hold that wing onto the fuselage. Those are called rails. And I'm going to flip these off just to show you. Hold on just a second. Flip those forward and back, and then you push up and you can remove the wing that way. That way it's easier to pack. Looking at the end plates, this allows you to build a flat wing. This gives you the dihedral effect, which keeps the airplane upright, keeps it from doing a side slip. So this gives you the dihedral effect in a really simple way. Looking back here, this is called a subfin. It's a fin, but it hangs below the other pieces here. And that's designed that way because there's less blanketing. If the fin was up here, it would get blanketed by this front part of the stabilizer. So this can be a little bit smaller and a little bit lighter. This piece is called the elevator tab, and this is called a rudder tab. And these are for making fine adjustments. You can see that there's already a left turn built into this. Can you see the difference in angle between the motor stick and the tail boom? That helps fly the airplane in a circle. You don't want it flying straight because it'll fly straight into the wall and come down. So these airplanes, because they're built for indoor, they have to fly in circles. I'm going to show you the construction techniques for building this airplane. What we're going to do is talk about materials. We're going to cut the pieces for the different parts of the airplane. We're going to assemble it, and then we'll talk about flying. I want you to refer to the actual dimensions on the plan and the weights of the wood that are used for building this model. The tools that I've accumulated over many years. You don't need everything that you're going to see on this video, so see what you can do to borrow things, and you may have a lot of this stuff already. This is a sanding block that I made just from a thick piece of balsa, but you can buy something equivalent to that at Home Depot or one of those stores. They have a sponge that's covered with sand. Those will work very well. In other words, don't break your piggy bank. You don't have to. I do recommend this if you're going to be stripping your own balsa wood. You can also buy wood that's already stripped. postal scale, I would get one a little bit more sensitive than this that reads down to tenths of a gram, or use your science lab scale and talk to your science teacher. Not only does the grain vary across the width of a sheet, but also the density. You can see the darker stripes, those are denser wood and they're actually heavier wood. And shifting over to this one, you can see it's a lot more uniform across that sheet. You want to check this against the light, because if you don't, you're going to end up with some sticks that are heavier than others and you won't know why. The weight of the wood that you're using for the different parts of the model are critical. You want denser wood or higher strength wood for things like spars, especially the fuselage. There's other parts of it that you want to really lighten up on. The ribs, the stabilizer outline, things like that. This is called a hanging postal scale. This is an essential tool for grading balsa wood. You can get a digital version of it for about $13, $15 online. This one's probably $5 to $7. You want something that weighs grams. That will allow you to convert the weight to density using the balsa density chart. When you're going down to the hobby store, ask permission to weigh the wood, and you also want to use a piece of tape instead of clamping this little clamp onto the wood, because that'll put a dent in the wood. The diagram that I have grades balsa wood that is in this dimension, which is 3 inches by 36 inches and by whatever thickness. This happens to be 1/8 thickness. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that settle down here, and you can slow down that oscillation, and then you just read how many grams that is. It looks like it's just over 25 grams. And then if you look at your chart, between 21 and 28 grams, that's probably right in the middle, 26. And that would be between 6 pounds and 8 pounds. So that would be a 7 pound per cubic foot density. That would be appropriate for using for the very light center rib on the model that we're talking about. You want wood for the fuselage that's in maybe the 10 to 12 pound range. And this piece I think is close to 10 pounds. Let's weigh that. And that's 1/8 of an inch thick and 3 inches wide. Let's take a look at the scale here. And that is almost exactly 35 grams. So if we look at 1/8 and 35 grams, that's 10 pound per cubic foot wood. That's appropriate for the fuselage. That might be appropriate for spars, like the leading edge and the trailing edge of the wing. So that's how you weigh the balsa wood, and that's how you grade the density. We have some scales. These are printed off the internet. This is the one that I have and I use a lot. For your purposes in getting balsa weighed, these are fine. This one's more sensitive. It goes to 1/10 of a gram. 2010 price on that is $6.95 through Amazon. This one is $8.49 through Amazon. If you don't have one of these scales, if you go to your science lab and ask the instructor, I'm sure he'll let you use his gram scale, and you can weigh your balsa and the rubber motors there as well. Usually what I like to do is to pre-kit the model. In other words, cut all the parts that we need first before actually starting to assemble them and glue them together. So what I want to do is show you some of the cutting tools that I use. This is one of my favorites. It's an X-Acto blade. It's a number 11 blade on that X-Acto knife handle. And this is an important thing. You want to put something on there to keep it from rolling. I've been injured by these rolling off the table and trying to catch them or having them stick in your foot. Not fun. Another one of these cutting tools is a single edge razor blade. One of my favorites for cutting across a strip. It's also a single edge blade, but it comes in a form called an injector. That's something that can be purchased at drugstores or grocery stores. Better than all of these for stripping wood, which is cutting strips of wood, is this item here. It's called a balsa stripper. It's available, I believe, still for under $10. That's probably going to give you more uniform results, and it's worth the investment. So I'm going to show you how to strip the balsa wood using a corkback steel ruler. You don't want to use a plastic ruler for this because you'll cut into the plastic. This is also something I hadn't pointed out yet. This is a cutting board piece of plastic. You can get those at Bed Bath & Beyond or any of those stores that sell kitchen items. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this X-Acto blade, and I'm going to strip off a piece of wood that's 1/16 inch square, and this would be appropriate for use for the stabilizer outline. I'm going to show you how to measure first. What you want to do is get these marks on here that are 1/16 from the edge. Then you can follow them along as you push the ruler along. And there, that should be enough. Okay, we're going to line the ruler up on those marks like that. And this is one of my favorites for doing this. And get over this, get your head over it so that you're pointing that blade straight down, and strip slowly. No hurry. Keep it going. And when you get to the edge of the cutting board, slide everything over, and then reset this on the 1/16 marks that you've made. Get the blade back into the cut where it ended, and keep on going. When you're looking at the edge of the sheet, sometimes it'll start to develop a little burble in it, and that has to do with it's hitting denser grain and softer grain. And so what you want to do is true up that edge, and you can use a long sandpaper block like this. You just want to slide it along and true up that edge like that. Then the next cut that you make will be a lot straighter. I want to show you how to use this tool. It's the balsa stripper, and the first thing you have to do to start stripping wood is to determine whether you're going to make this the same thickness. So that's what I want to do, is make this a 1/16 square strip of balsa. So what I do is I screw this knurled nut on the end here, lay it over the top like this, and then back it off until the blade touches the wood. And that's too tight, just enough so it moves. Now I have the same dimension here as the thickness of the wood, so that's going to give me a square strip when I'm done. So you just set it here, and you slide this length along the length of the wood, and it just strips it right out. It's very fast. Find that cut again, and just keep going. See how the blade actually grips into that cut there and helps you move the whole thing forward like that. Hold the sheet with your left hand, and here we go, right off the end. Okay? A much more uniform strip than you can get any other way. If you want to avoid stripping wood, you can buy 1/16 inch 3 feet long strips. If you can find sticks that are in the 3/10 of a gram range, that's 8-pound wood, and that's appropriate for a beginning model. One of the things that we're going to do is cut out some templates that we can use for cutting various parts like the front rail, the rear rail, the end plate brace, and also the rib shapes for both the stabilizer and the main wing. So what you'll need is a piece of tracing paper, and you can just put this right over the plan. And we're going to do the rib first here. So the bottom of the rib, we're going to just trace it right through and use a straight edge. Like that. And then for the top of the rib, you can either use a ship's curve, like that. And let me just draw it with that. And or if you can't find one of these, you can just use a French curve and find one of the curves on that that fits the curved part of the front of the wing, and you can draw that up to that point there, and then we'll mark that. And then behind that high point, you can actually just use a straight edge. It changes the shape of the rib a little bit, but it's still a very efficient rib shape. So I'm going to draw that one on here just so you can see that. Okay, and let me move this over so you can see both of those rib shapes. Okay, so what you're going to do now is you can just take this and flip it over onto a piece of mat board like that, and you can take the back of your pencil and you just rub it on that line, and it transfers the line that you want to the mat board. And then you lift that off, and now you have a line on there that you can cut. Once you get this transferred, heavy up the lines because they're easier to cut if they're easier to see. So there's that top curve and the flat bottom. And now that's ready to cut. I've done this with the other shapes that we need. This is the wing rib, and this is the stabilizer rib. These are the two rails that actually grip the center rib and hold the wing onto the fuselage. This is the end plate. We also need a little form for cutting those out. That's for the end plate brace. This is the piece that was cut out for the end plate. This piece was the rear part of the rail that holds onto the center rib, and this is the front rail. Here's the stabilizer rib shape cut out as a template, and this is the template for the wing rib. Now you'll notice that I've done this in 16th inch ply. You can use mat board if you want. One of the things that's a good idea to do is to coat the top edge at least with CA glue. It's also called super glue. Then you can sand that and make it very smooth, and it also hardens up that edge so that you can cut along that more easily. Now we'll show you how to cut parts using those templates that we just cut out. This one is the stabilizer rib, and what I want to do is show you how to cut a solid rib with that. And you line this up with the bottom here, and carefully cut right along that. Get your head right over it so you're straight up and down. And on this rib, you want to go all the way off the edge like that, okay? Later you can cut it to size like this, cutting that end and that end. And there you have a solid stabilizer rib. Sliced ribs are lighter, and you'll see why. There's less material used. Line that up, and we'll come off that shape first. Okay, then what you're going to do is just going to slide this down just a little bit, and that'll be the thickness of the sliced rib. Push down so it holds it, and then slice. And that rib is lighter than a solid rib. The grain direction is very important on the ribs. It should flow along the length of the rib. These would be the rear rails, and you need two of these. This is where that pointed tool, the sharp X-Acto blade, really makes sense, because it'd be hard to get a razor blade into these shapes. And here you can just cut that straight, and later, after you free up these corners, later you can sand those rounded shapes, and I'll show you how to do that. So you don't have to cut those curves. Curves are harder to cut. These are the rear rails. It's important, in order to be able to slide the rubber bands on over these to hold this to the fuselage, you need to sand a bevel into both sides. So if you take a look at that, I'm just going to bevel that on one side and the other like that. Turn the pair around. You could tape them together if you wanted to, like that. And now they're beveled toward each other like that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to use the stripping tool again to strip the leading edge, and you can take the dimension directly off the plan like this. You can line that up on one side and have the blade on the other. So that's the width of the leading edge. Then we're going to take our wood. This is 7.5 pound wood. That's pretty good for the leading edge. It's a fairly wide piece, and remember that the wider the piece that you're using, the lighter the wood you should be using. So this is the leading edge, and we'll strip that piece. So what we're going to do first is cut the leading edge to size and length, and you just lay it over the plan and get your razor blade and line it up on the very end over the plan. Make that mark on it, and then you can cut it on the cutting board like that, so you don't cut through the plan. And again, you get over the top of it and you push down, and you can rock it a little bit and cut through. Okay, so that's the right length for the leading edge. This is the cross section of the leading edge, and you can see that it's pointed forward, and that's the shape that we're going to sand this rectangular leading edge into. This is a very handy item. I suggest everybody get one of these. This is oak. It should be some kind of a hardwood, have a really smooth finish on it. Because it's so much harder than balsa wood, you can lay things on it and you can use it to shape balsa, and it won't hurt this form, and the form will make a really nice solid support. I've got this piece of balsa super glued onto the edge of this at the exact width that this has to be, and so then I can shave that leading edge forward to a point on the front. So watch how I do this. This is just a big sanding block, and you just start taking off that front corner like that. If you want, you can tape this down. I'm going to switch my hands over in just a minute, but then you start to do this rolling motion as you're sanding. I'll just do this one end to show you. And you just keep sanding and keep looking at the shape. You can stop occasionally to check the shape, and it's getting down there. Let's remove some of the sawdust, and we'll keep going on that. It has to be a sharp leading edge. Take your time. I'm using about 150 grit sandpaper on this. That's better. And now I'm going to do this other end here. And we'll do some finishing touches. You can do finishing touches in the air like this. I'm just trying to get that front edge shaved down so it's very sharp. And then it cuts through the air better that way. Less drag. Less profile drag is the technical term. There we go, nice and sharp. Okay, I'm going to show you how to notch the leading edge. And the notches are to allow the ribs to actually fit into the back of the leading edge. So what I did is I made a template based on the plan, and you can see that these notches are marked everywhere there's a rib. Now there's a difference between the left and the right and the spacing on them, so you want to make sure that you get that correct on the back of the leading edge. So this is left and this is right, but in order to cut these, we're going to flip this over so it still stays the same orientation of left to right, and we're going to flip this over on top of the leading edge, and we're going to notch those with the X-Acto knife. Once you get it lined up carefully on both sides and have this coming all the way out to the front of that form, there we go, then you can start to notch these rib areas here. And I kind of bite into it a little bit at a time. I don't try to do the whole cut at once. I start with the center one because that's wider, and then you get this vertical, get the blade vertical like that, and you're cutting out that little chunk of wood where the rib is going to go. Okay, there's one. And these are smaller, and it's okay to cut them a little bit smaller than they need to be. You can widen them later. So just cut down through that wood and notch it. And the next one. And so on. The next thing we're going to do is check. We've got the notches cut. I want to double check to make sure that they're the wider ones on the left, because the left wing panel is actually longer than the right wing panel, and I'll explain that in just a minute. But we put that over the plan, and the notches are exactly in the right position, and they're all cut to the same depth. The reason that the left panel of the wing is longer is because that's going to be on the inside of the turn. As the airplane flies, it'll develop more lift on that, so the airplane can skid around in a very flat turn. You don't want it banking up like that because you lose a lot of lift when you're doing that. Now we're going to start with the trailing edge, and to get that dimension you have to look at the plan. It says 1/8 wide by 3/32 deep or thick. So this is a 1/8 inch thick sheet, so we're going to cut 3/32 off of that, and then we're going to lay that down flat so the 1/8 dimension fits on the plan. Okay, so we have to take that dimension off of the ruler here, and we're going to strip that piece of wood all the way off the end. There we go. And there it is. There's our trailing edge piece, and that's going to end up fitting right over that plan, and we'll might as well cut the length of it. Set the blade, and then cut it over here on the cutting board. Like that. Okay, so there's the trailing edge piece. Okay, I'm going to show you how to strip a piece of wood for the fuselage. Use your balsa stripper, set that for the width on the plan, and we're going to just strip this whole length first, and then we'll cut it to length all the way off. Okay, and I have another length here. I'm cutting several fuselages, so I want to show you how to do this cross cut. You take your single edge razor blade, and it needs to be the heavier blade because holding that single edge injector blade is going to be difficult. So this will help you push through that wood. What you do is you get your head over it, make sure that it's vertical, and you set the blade, and then you push down and forward like that, and you can rock it a little bit. This is pretty dense wood. This is about 13-pound wood, and then I'm going to cut that shape that's close to the end of the fuselage. So I have two of them here. And what I want to do is show you how to test these fuselage sticks. So I'm just going to set this on this clothespin. The clothespin raises that up a little bit so that we can do this test. This is a stack of nickels. This is 8 nickels, and they're 5 grams a piece. So that's a 40-gram weight, and I'm going to put it right on the end here. And by holding it here and putting the weight here, you can see that it deflects a little bit, but that's a pretty strong stick. That's 13-pound wood. I'm going to show you if you have wood that's too light, watch what happens. This is cut from a piece of, I don't know, 6 or 7-pound wood. Watch this. That's not appropriate for a fuselage. It's not going to hold up very well. So this one we don't need. It's not going to work for us because it has to hold the twist and the pull of the rubber motor without getting distorted too much. One of the things you want to do before you go too much farther is you want to get the rubber bands on the fuselage that are going to hold the wing on the fuselage. And I use 3/16 inch elastic bands. They're orthodontic rubber bands. And I put 4 of them on there. They don't weigh very much. And you just roll them on to the fuselage one at a time, or if you can get more at a time, that'd be great. There's 1, 2, and here's a couple together. That works fine. 3, 4. So here's how this is going to work. The 2 that are up front are going to slide over the front rail that is attached to the wing, and the 2 rear rubber bands are going to slide over the rear rail, and that's going to hold the wing on, and the wing will be up here in front. You want to get these rubber bands on before you put on the prop assembly or the tail assembly, because the tail assembly you won't be able to slide these over that, and you won't be able to slide these over the propeller either. This is a 1/8 square piece of wood that I stripped off and cut to the length of the tail boom on the plan. What I want to do is show you how to taper this. You want to taper it from 1/8 square down to 1/16 square at this end here. So you start just on one side, take your sandpaper block and pull this way. Don't ever push that way because you'll break that stick. So you pull this way, and you can keep checking every once in a while. Check to see how narrow it's getting, and it's almost there. You could do this on both sides if you want, but it doesn't really matter. You can just take this off of one side. And you can see my thumb and finger are acting like risers on both sides, so I keep this block parallel to the cutting surface. And that's getting there, almost ready to turn it on its side. Okay, that's a good taper. That's about 1/16 thick now. And now I'm going to just rotate it 90 degrees and shave it down to 1/16 this way as well. Okay, there it is. 16th inch square at that end, 1/8 square at that end. Okay, and that's our tail boom. I'm going to show you how to set up your building board. I've taped the plan on the top of this piece of insulation foam. You have to cover it with plastic wrap in order to keep the glue from sticking to the plan. So you take some packing tape, and even before you pull the plastic off the roll, you stick this about halfway across like that, and then we're going to flip the board over like this, and now we can lay this down, maybe 4 or 5 inches inside the end of the board. Make sure that that adheres pretty well, very well I mean, and then you pull the plastic out like that and get it wrapped over the other side, and we're going to go all the way around the other end of the board as well. And we're not going to worry about any of the longitudinal stretches at this point. And we're going to pull this around the back like that. Now I put it between my knees to hold it, and don't use the serrated edge. That'll stretch the plastic and it'll make a mess. Use a pair of scissors, sharp scissors, and just cut right across in a straight line like that. Okay? This can be so frustrating, some people don't even want to build a model after that if they have a hard time with this. So then get the right length, get your piece of tape, and now you're just going to stick the about halfway across, and now you can stretch. You can take this like this, stretch up, make sure it stays over the plan, stretch up, over the side, and then adhere that. So it's got a really good stretch to it. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to get all these horizontal wrinkles out of it. And you can just use pieces of tape and give it a stretch. Don't pull it so that it uncovers the plan on this side though. Okay, that's in the middle. And then we'll do the opposite in the middle as well. So touch it to the film and give it a stretch. And now you can see that the central area here is very smooth. Okay, that's what we're going for on these two sides here. So here we go. Give that a stretch. All right, that's all stretched nice and smooth. Okay, wrinkles up here don't matter because they're not over the plan. What we care about is what's over the plan. Take your box of pins, and you want to put about 40 pins. That's about how many you'll need for holding most of these parts in place on the plan. And so it's a good idea to put them up here out of the way, off of the actual plan itself, and put them so that they're far enough apart you can grab them one at a time. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to lay some packing tape here in the corner. Probably three layers, and 3. Flatten it out as much as you can. And then what I'm going to do is mark on this a square shape like this, and line that up so you get it square. And this will be our little mini cutting board over here. What we can use that for, we're cutting a length of wood like this. You set the blade like this. you make a little mark on that wood, then you come over here and you line that up with the long piece, and then you line the blade up with that cross piece, which is 90 degrees, and then when you push down, you're going to get a perfect square cut. If you don't want to use the food wrap to wrap the building board and cover the plan, you can use wax paper. This is wax paper, and it's simply put into place with transparent tape, and it works just as well as the food wrap. What I want to do is start with the end plates here. I'm going to use my thinner blade. This is 10 thousandths of an inch thick. This is 12 thousandths. A little bit makes a lot of difference. So watch what I do here. Get that over the plan. In fact, it's a good idea if you want to. You can even stand up and look down on that end. And here's setting that one. Okay, so I have a little nick mark in that. Set it here like this against that length. And line that up, get your head over that cut, and push down. There you go. Now that's a square cut. We'll do a few more of these. Let's get that length. And this is this is very light wood. This is probably 6-7 pound wood. And this is for the end plates. There's not a lot of stress on them. Just air forces, I guess. And let's cut some of the shorter pieces. And you can use that same length again because of the same. It's a square piece. You can use that for measuring. Push down, and there it is. Okay, so those are the parts for one of the end plates. And what I want to do is show you what we call pinning techniques. Get this part lined up on the plan, and you're going to pin it in place, but you never put the pin through the wood. That will greatly weaken it. So that's a never ever. The second pin, you bury the tip and then you rock it over before you press it in, and it should touch the wood without compressing it too much. You don't want to dent the wood. It's okay if you do. The light wood probably will get dented in places. Before you cover that piece, you want to make sure that you touch that with a little drop of water, and the dents will swell out and they'll even out. So that's one. That's called cross pinning. We'll do it again over here. And again, you bury the tip of the pin and then rock it over before you push it in, and then that holds that piece in place. And it's pretty tight. It's hard to move that piece. I'm going to adjust it so it's right over the plan. Okay, I want to talk about glue. I'm going to be using Carpenter's wood glue. We're going to dilute that glue. Now, I've diluted that to a creamy consistency and loaded it into a syringe. And the syringe you can get from feed stores and things like that. You can also cut off the tip and grind that down so it's a little bit smooth and not as sharp. And then I always put water in the cap to keep this water-based glue from drying out. And I keep it capped most of the time. Another way that you can do this is you can put some glue in a lid like this, and you can dilute it to a creamy consistency and use a wooden stick for an applicator. I'm just going to use this for some water and probably dilute it maybe half or 1/3 with water, and you stir it up so that it's a creamy consistency. And then you can use that applicator to put the glue on. So I'll do this with this for demonstration purposes, but I really prefer to use the syringe. Okay, so that's a nice creamy consistency there. And what I'm going to do is these crossbars, I'm going to put a little dab of glue on the end there and on here. And I'm also going to take that piece and touch it on the end where it's going to go and form that joint, and do the same thing on this piece of wood here. So I'm getting a little bit of glue right on the inside part there. Then what we're going to do is we're going to let that glue dry. The reason we're doing this is that they've discovered that double gluing is exactly twice as strong as just putting the glue on there and sticking the parts together, clamping them in place. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the end of this stick, here and here. The other thing that you can do is you can also just dip this into your glue source like that and touch it to that end there, and where it's going to go on this piece here, like that. And then just set it over one of these pieces, let the air get to it, and that'll let it dry. Here's the syringe method. You would just do the same thing. You would pick this up and just push on the syringe and get a little bit of glue on the end there like that. Okay, so we're going to let those dry, then we'll put them together with the second gluing. I'm going to check now to see if these ends are dry. You can put them on your lower lip, and if it feels cool, it's not dry yet. If it feels room temperature, as these do, then they're ready for the second gluing and then putting in place and pinning in place. So this one's ready. This is the cross piece, and I'll get both ends dipped in glue like that and set that against that piece. And if you like, you can cross pin that piece in place and then run the other one up against it, and that has also the glue on it that we had from before, and that's now reconstituted with the new wet glue. And what we're going to do, this is called pressure pinning. We'll put a pin here and then put a pin next to that one and actually do a little bit of pressure. You can see how I'm angling that pin in, and it puts a little bit of pressure on that joint, because that's otherwise a fairly weak joint. Okay, we'll do the same thing on this end. Put that in place, and put that one in place. And there's no particular order to this. I might be able to get away with just doing pressure pinning on this one. Putting one there, and then putting one on the very end, and pushing in a little bit. That's going to leave a tiny little dent, which I can deal with later. But there it is, that's in place, and we're going to let that dry now. All right, we're going to put in the triangle braces on the end plates, and what these do is they help the end plate attach to the ribs on the ends of the wing. So this has been single glued, it's dry now, and now I'm going to do the second gluing. It doesn't have to be thick, just a little bit of glue, a little dab will do you. Lay it in there like that, and then we're going to put a little bit of pressure on it with a pin back here and over here, and then pressure pinned in the middle like this. Stick the pin in, rock it into it. This piece you can dent and it's no problem. Like that. Let's do the other one. And push in like that, okay? That's ready to go. And what we're going to do next is we're going to put bond paper gussets on the corners. That will help strengthen that joint, and it'll also give it a little bit more rigidity. This is bond paper, and you can see that there's 3 layers. You can put 3 or 4 layers together. This is stripped or cut to about 1/4 of an inch, and we're going to cut these gussets that go in the corners. We're going to cut those out of this piece here. So you can do an angled cut. I'm going to do a little bit more of an angled cut like that, and then a straight cut, because this has to be a right angle for the corners. And watch that again, that way and that way. That should do it for right now. And how we're going to do this is you put a little bit of glue right on the corner where that gusset's going to go, like that. Doesn't have to be a lot. It actually sticks better if there's not a lot of glue. And then there's a little bit of glue on the tip of this. You can pick up one of those gussets and just lay it in like that. You can push this down with your finger and hold it for a couple of seconds, and that should stick. And if it doesn't stick, you can add some glue to it later. Sometimes they won't stick all the way across, and you can touch them up later. Let's do the last one here. And then we're going to go over to the fuselage. We can do those other ones later. Okay, now we're going to go over to the stabilizer, and I've trimmed that end square so we can set that over the plan like this. Get our thin razor, line that up over the plan like that, make a mark on it, come over to our square guide and cut through that, and that'll be for that piece. And we'll do the next one. Cut the long pieces first, and these can all be the same weight wood. cut it square, and that's that piece. And I'm going to pin one of these down, cross pin it in place, and then use that as a stable part of the piece that I can push other pieces up against. Okay, and now we're going to do some of the cross pieces. These are actually compression ribs now, the ones that go across. And I need to square up that end. Lay that in behind, that would be the trailing edge, and mark this. Oops, cut right through. That happens sometimes. You're trying not to cut there because it cuts through the plan and eventually the glue will seep through, but if it happens, it happens. Okay, so there's that one. I'm going to do one for here and one for here using the same measurement as this one, and they'll all be square. Let's get these single glued here and here. And we're just going to touch it to that part where it's going to go, like that. And then this one here, we can do the same thing. We can hold it in place, touch this other end so it gets a little bit of glue where it's supposed to be. I'm going to pin this one down. I think it'll be easier if I do that. So let's get some glue on the end of this one. Touch it there and here. Let that dry. Touch at both ends, here and there, and we're going to let those dry for a minute. These are dry now. Yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the second gluing on here. Whoops, whoa, too much. That happens. And on this end, and pressure pin that in place. Here's the pressure against that other one. And so just understand you can move this around a little bit while it's under the pressure, like that. Make sure it's flat, but there's enough pressure on there that that's going to make a strong joint. Okay, the second one, we'll do that one in the middle. And you can pin this one first and do the pressure from the other side, like that. And pressure, there we go. And you can move these if you want to, if you need to get some of that distortion out of it. These are the sliced ribs, and they go over the top of the compression ribs, and then there's some that don't have a compression rib underneath. We're going to start with those because right now the pins are in the way of doing those other ones. So we're going to do some single gluing first here, and we'll do this on all the ribs. And you'll notice that this has a flat spot. These ribs were cut slightly oversized so that they overlap front and back. But I want to point out that there's a long flat spot here so that some of that flat spot will come into contact with the top of the leading edge and the trailing edge. So we're going to make a contact there. Make sure that we get some glue in those two positions like that. Set that one aside. Pull the pins on this one and this one so I can get the same gluing going on those. We're going to just get that area wet on the top there and there, and then we can put these pressure pins back in. Okay, these are dry now. You test them. Okay, so we're going to pull these pins. These joints are also dry. And we're going to glue the ribs in place. Just a little dab will do you. We're just re-wetting the glue. We're not actually adding a bunch of glue to that. And so put it over the top of that compression rib, like that. And then you can do pins on either side to keep that vertical. And then you can do a little bit of pressure pinning. Let's just hold this down just for a few seconds. If you hold it down like that, it'll stick better. And then if you feel like it, you can do some cross pinning just over the front and back of each of those ribs like that. That holds it in place. But actually, if you hold this just with your hands for, maybe 30 seconds, it's going to stick. And then you can just leave it alone and go on with the next one. Hold, count to 10, and lift off. You can put in corner gussets if you want. I find if you do this double gluing and you get the joints right, you don't have to do gussets everywhere. They're on the plan to show you where they would be if you wanted to add them. And I think the best way to think about this is, rather than overbuilding or beefing up things, why don't you wait until it breaks? If it breaks, then you can do that reinforcement. These have had plenty of time to dry, and what I'm going to do is show you how to remove the pins. You put your finger right next to where the pin's pulling out, like that. It's a safer way of pulling these pins. And then I want to show you how to remove the stabilizer from the plan. You don't just lift it up, because part of it could be sticking. So you take a pin and just slide it underneath, and wherever it's sticking, it'll relieve that stuck spot. And then there it was stuck on that last piece. And then what we're going to do is just going to simply push this forward like that, and we're going to use a sandpaper block, and we're going to sand off those rib ends that are hanging over the trailing edge and the leading edge. So do this carefully. Okay, finish sanding off those little overhanging ends. Those curves actually need to be smoothed out. You see that, how it's got a little flat spot on it? We're going to try to make that into a smoother curve. I'm going to pick it up to do that because I think it's easier for me to do it in the air and take a look at it. So hold it really close to where you're sanding. Okay. You can see how that curve is evened out now, and that's what you want to do with all of the ribs. I changed my mind about the gussets. I do want to add some, at least to the corners here. We don't have to put them all the way along. And hold it in place. And we're going to let that dry, and then if it needs to be stuck down a little bit better, we can do that. This is kind of an awkward joint in that one part of it's higher than the other. So it'll take a while for that bond paper to conform to that step. Okay, so we'll do that on the rest of these. Now what we're going to do is put the wing together. You'll notice on the plan that there's a little piece of wood indicated. Just need to use this as a shim. And what this does is it lifts up the leading edge only on the left side, just a little bit. And then when we get the ribs and the trailing edge and everything glued together, it will maintain that warp on the left side. So the left side of the wing then will have a little bit greater angle of attack. So when the airplane's flying, it'll keep that left side up so it won't roll. It'll continue with that idea of keeping the airplane in a flat turn. Let's start with the center rib, and let's see if it fits. It's a little bit wide for the notch that I cut, so we can adjust that by using a piece of sandpaper. Let's get one that's right on the edge there. And I'm just going to sand it a little bit narrower there so it fits into that notch. Do a little bit and then try it. That looks like it'll fit. Okay, so then on any of the notched joints, you don't have to do double gluing because that's a very strong joint. Double gluing is meant for any of the butt joints or end joints. So here we go. Put a little glue on there, on the front, on the sides of that front part of the rib. Slide it into place. Make sure it lines up over the plan, and double check to make sure that the leading edge is exactly over the plan. And then we can do some pinning like this to keep that vertical. And if you want, you can do some pressure pinning. Let's put this one angled back a little bit on the leading edge, and then we can use a little bit of pressure on the back of that rib there, so it keeps it right where we want it. Then let's do the end ribs. Now these you do want to double glue, so let's get that started. Let's use this one here. Get a little bit of glue on the front and side. That's going to be touching that joint there, like that. And then we're going to lay that down. Do the other side, just a little bit to get it wet. And lay that in. That's getting that little socket there on the end wet with glue. And then we can do the same thing with sliced ribs. This is a notch or a socket joint, and we can just slide that in, do it carefully, and then bring the end of the rib down. Make sure it's all the way forward into that notch. We're going to see if these end ribs are dry. Yep, they're dry, so we can do the second gluing now. Just another very thin layer, and then it'll stick right away. And put that in place, and we're going to put a pin on the outside of that just to press that into place, like that. And then the other side, I'm going to put a pin in front and one on the side, pressing that into that open-sided notch there. There we go. Okay, and then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to get a single gluing on the ends of all the ribs and also on those positions of the ribs that touch the trailing edge. They need to be lined up close to where the rib's going to be. Put a little bit of glue on the back end of the rib like that, and then locate where that's going to be, and then do it a little bit wider gluing in there. So make sure that we hit that when we're putting that back in place. These are dry now, so now we're going to pin them in position. Put a little bit more glue on the end of that rib, like that. Push this forward, put a pin behind it. Make sure that it lines up even with the end of that trailing edge piece. And we're going to do the same thing here, all the way along. I'm going to put that in place. Pin. And there, and the last one over here. Get that lined up. Pin it in place, and we're good to go. These joints are dry, so I'm going to put gussets here, and on each of these all the way across. And we'll use one of the right-angled gussets like that. Press it in place. Whoops. Make sure it sticks. Okay, and that seems to be sticking. And let's do this one. And this can be a shape like that, reaching up and out to that rib. We don't need any along the front here, just the corners, and then these all the way along. So we'll continue with those in just a minute. What we're going to do next is the tail boom fin assembly. We're going to take this long stick. Now the blade is lined up with the tail boom. Set it like this. This is a soft piece, so I'm just going to cut right through it. And you see how that fits right against the tail boom there? Then on the other end, we're going to keep that there. And this piece, we're going to line up with the bottom or the back of the fin like this. Cut through. And then here's a little magic of geometry. If you take this piece and turn it like that, you've already got that shape cut that's correct on the end for those two pieces coming together there. Then all you have to do is do a straight cut up here. And I'm just going to set it here and cut that over on our square. Okay. And then we're going to do the single gluing, double gluing. Tap that one. That's going to get that wet. And a little bit more here on this end. And have to put it here to see where it goes on this end and just where they come together. Okay, these are dry now, so what I'm going to do is add a little bit more glue. Set that here. Now here there's a little bit of special pinning. If you just put pressure here, it's going to squeeze that piece out like that. So you have to put a piece here to restrain that from doing that. Put a piece back here, a pin back here, to keep that from moving out. And you can also put one here just to keep it lined up on the end there. And now when you put a pressure pin on this piece, it's not going to squeeze out. And then the only other one that we have to do is over here. Pin that in place. That's got its second gluing on. And do a little pressure pinning here. And there it is. I've cut this gusset. It's a large piece that will fit in there. So this will also go over this little step because the pieces of wood are different thickness here. So get the glue on there, and then you have to wait for the paper to get saturated a little bit before you can press that over that step. And I use just the needle here like that, and as soon as it gets wet enough, it'll conform to that step. And then that's just basically holding that joint together. And if any of it hangs out, we can trim that. There we go. That's going to stay. And we can do a corner gusset here, one with a 90-degree angle on it. And then this one here as well. Press that in place. Now you can pull the pins if you need to get in there. Like that. And if it's sticking, then you just let it dry. The next thing we need to talk about are propellers. This is a commercially available propeller made by SIG Corporation, and it's 7 inches in length. Let's see how much it actually weighs. That is a whopping 5 grams. That's too heavy for a prop. If the whole mass of the airplane can be down to the minimum weight of 7 grams, something's got to give, and it's going to be the propeller. So one of the things that you can do is scrape it down and lighten it that way. This is a PEC Polymers prop. The prop that's allowed on the current rules is 20 centimeters, which is roughly 7.8 inches, 7 3/4 inches. So this one at 7 inches is a little bit short. This one's too long, so not only do we have to scrape it to lighten it, but we actually have to cut it down. This is called an Ikara prop. This one is also on the long side, but we don't have to do much to lighten the blades because they're already light. This is the SIG prop. I've discovered in test flights that this prop works very well. I've gotten 2 minutes out of this airplane in initial test flights. I hope to get longer flights with it. In the rest of the video, you'll see the Ikara prop, which is a little bit more tricky to trim. You'll see that in the rest of the film because that's the one that I'm working on now to try to get a little bit more performance out of the airplane. My recommendation is to use this prop, even though you'll see the Ikara prop on most of the models in the film. Regardless of which prop you're using, all other construction techniques will be the same. Initially, these props weigh about 5 grams, and I've been able to scrape the prop and get them down to 2 grams. It takes patience and time, and let me show you how this is done safely. What you do is you get a piece of masking tape and you roll it like this and put it on the end here. What you're looking for is a mailing tube that's kind of heavy. If you don't have one of those, but you do have a paper towel tube, what you can do is you can stuff that with newspaper and it'll make it a good solid support for scraping it as well. But I'm going to use this one because I have it. And what you're going to do is take this propeller and you're going to set it right on that tape like that, press it down, and then you can put your hand out here. I like to put my hand under here, and it's safe because the prop will keep you from hitting your thumb. You want to use a very sharp knife, okay? And one of the ways I get that knife sharp is using one of these ceramic tools that you can get at sporting goods stores. You just draw the blade through there like that. You want it really sharp. Go slowly like this. You can build up your speed as you get more experience doing that. And you can see that it's shaving plastic off of this propeller, okay? Then periodically, you want to check that. I'm going to blow that plastic away. Periodically, you want to check this for balance, and you can also weigh it to see how much lighter it's getting. But if you hold it like this, you can see that this blade is heavier. Then we have to work on that blade there. If you look at the blade, this area here is quite a bit thicker than the rest, so you can really work this out here and get a lot of the weight off by working in that area. This is a fuselage stick, and what I want to do is show you how easily this prop is to apply. It's got a little socket on the front there. It's called the nose piece, and you simply plug it on the front of that, and this fuselage is a little bit less deep than it needs to be to fill that space. So what I've done is I've cut a little bit of a wedge of balsa wood, and what you do is you simply slide that in underneath, and then it's tight. You want to make sure that this is tight because you don't want the pitch of the prop changing all the time. In fact, what I usually do is put a little drop of super glue there, and if you look at this plane here, that's what I've done. This is the balsa wedge that I set in there, And you can also see that I cut down some of this hub material. You can cut that and remove a little bit of weight by cutting that off like that. Don't cut off too much. You still need enough to plug that into. This SIG prop has some down thrust built into it. You can see that it's angling down slightly. That's important for stability, especially for models that are built by beginners. It adds some stability to the flight, prevents power stalling, things like that. The other thing I want you to notice is how to bend in a little bit of left turn. Okay, so what I'm going to do is grab the propeller housing or the nose piece and then hold the plastic part right underneath that and bend it to the left so it takes a set. It's made out of nylon and it'll take a little bit of a set to the left. And you can adjust that as you continue to test fly, and you'll be able to get a very consistent left turn out of it. The left thrust will hold that into the left turn for the entire powered portion of the flight, which is almost the entire flight. If you discover that the left turn is opening up, or your circle is opening up at the end of the flight, that means you need to use a little bit more rudder turn and a little bit less left prop thrust. The next thing we're going to do is put this pin through the back. This will be the rear motor hook, and I'm going to set it here and push it through with these pair of pliers. And these are the round nose pliers because we're going to round over the bottom of the motor hook, so it'll be nice and round. And you just push it through a little bit farther than it needs to be, like that. And then what we're going to do is take the very end and bend it 90 degrees, and then bend it 90 degrees again, like that. Well, it came sliding up. That's all right. And then we're going to push this down and push that through the wood so it's like a staple, and it sticks into that. And then we're going to take a little bit of super glue, CA glue I call it, cyanoacrylate, it's another term, and put a little dab right there so that doesn't push out. There it is. And then on the bottom, what we're going to do is we're going to take this and give it a spin like this with the round pliers, like that. And we can even have this part sticking out on the left side of the fuselage a little bit. Okay, that's a good placement for that. And then we're going to take a gusset. This is cut out of balsa wood that's almost the same dimension as the fuselage. And I'm going to slide it in like that. And then CA glue that in place. Just like that. And this stuff goes everywhere. It's stuck to my fingernail. And we want to make sure it sticks to the wood. There we go. Okay. So that's stuck to the wood and to the hook. So that's a little support for the pressure of the motor under tension. We're going to cover these pieces here. These we're going to cover with tissue. We don't cover the whole thing with tissue because tissue is about 2.5 times heavier than the plastic covering that we're going to be using on the wings and stabilizer. But I like a little bit of color, so we're going to use this for some small areas like the fin and the end plates of the wing. Okay, so you cut this a little bit oversized and figure out where you're going to put that on there, and then flip this over because this is the side that the glue is going to get on. And we're going to use a glue stick. And you have to remember that when you're using a glue stick, you don't have much sensitivity with it. So go very lightly. You just have to put on just the barest amount. And when you get to the corner here, don't push through that corner and break it. And then here you can just dab some over that area. And then it's very simply a matter of repositioning that, making sure that you get it covered and press down. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this is Japanese tissue, and you can get it from hobby stores or online suppliers. And it comes in various colors, but what you need to do first is you need to shrink it. What I do is I spray it. I use an ironing board, I spray it down with water and use a pretty hot iron like for cotton, and you just quickly dry it, and it sizzles, and it won't stick to the iron if the iron's hot enough. And what you're doing is you're pre-shrinking this, because if you put this on right out of the package with changes in humidity, it's going to shrink that up, and it's going to warp and distort these surfaces that we want to stay flat. Okay, so we're going to set that aside, let that dry a little bit. You can turn it over and use your fingernail and make sure that it's adhering all along that outline like this. And you can see it. You can see where it's sticking and where it isn't, because it kind of evens out the wrinkles right over the area that you're pressing. And in here, I'm going to make sure it fits into that step. There we go. Okay, and I'm just going to let that dry for a while and work on the end plates. Now, the end plates, I want to have the covering on the outside of both end plates, so I need to turn these so that if I orient them like this, like the wing is going to be, these little braces are going to be forward, so it's going to be like that, okay? So I want that side, the outside, this one here, and the outside of this one here. So I'm going to do it like that, okay? And let's just cover these. Just tap a little bit of glue on that. Mostly it has to be along the outline. Just flip that over, glue side down, press it down. You don't have to get all but the largest wrinkles out, and you do that before you apply that. And then we're going to do the same thing like this. We're going to use our fingernail. And the other one, it stays wet long enough. It doesn't dry very quickly. If there's an area that turns out not to stick very well, you can peel this back. Like I think it's in the corner. It's doing pretty good. But there's a little spot there that's missing. So what I'm going to do is just peel that back. You can't do that with any other glue. Peel that back, reapply the glue, lay that down, burnish it down, and then go on to the other side. Okay, we'll set that aside and let those dry. And now with the fin, or with any of these parts that are tissue covered, what you want to use is this type of razor blade. This is the very thin injector razor blade. And you can start anywhere, but angle the blade like this so that when you're cutting into it, it's slicing. Don't try to push the blade through that way. Give it a little bit of a slice like this, and watch carefully so that you're not cutting into the wood. Go slowly, there's no hurry. And you can back up and come into that piece again. I'm going to have to move my hand a little bit closer to it now, closer to where I'm cutting. It's a little more steady that way. And he makes it look easy. Okay, so that's the fin. Here's another way to do it. You can do it actually on the cutting mat. Just go along. The same thing applies. You just have to be careful not to cut into the wood. All right, there it is. Now we're going to show you how to cover the wing and the stabilizer. This is very easily available material. This comes from the vegetable section of your local grocery store. Comes off the rolls. So what I'm going to do is open one of these up. Just cut off the closed end like that. Open this up. It's now a tube, and since I don't want the writing to be flying around, I'm going to cut through the writing part so I have a big piece of plastic left. So I'm going to cut through this way. And we've got plenty for probably 2 different planes here. So what we want to do is place this so that we have plenty of room around it to do our cuts, and we also need a line straight across. There happens to be a fold line right there, which is very handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this cutting board plastic, slip it in underneath here. So now what I'm going to do is take this steel straight edge, it's a cork back ruler, lay it down here, and I need a straight line because that's going to go underneath the leading edge of the wing. and it's going to go all the way back to the back of that leading edge. I'll show you what I mean in just a second. I'm going to put some of this contact cement that I've diluted with water, and here's the contact cement. It's Loctite brand. I've diluted that to a creamy consistency, and what I'm going to do is just apply that to the bottom of this leading edge. You can coat it fairly liberally because it's very diluted, and we want this to go all the way back to the back of the leading edge, like that. Once you get some on like this, it actually might be even easier to spread it with your finger. Okay, so we've got that. That'll spread it out very evenly. You see that? Okay, and it starts to dry right away, so you want to get this on the plastic. It just has to be just over the edge. I'm just seeing the back of that piece. Okay, so I'm sticking it down so that this is covering that part of it, and it sticks right away. You can see that. So I'm going to push that down, hold it down, press it down firmly, and then slowly lift up. You can see it's grabbing the plastic already, and it's also distorting the wood. That warp will go out of it when the water dries. Okay, so we're going to set that aside, and we'll go to the stabilizer. The front of the stabilizer is where the highest point of the airfoil is closer to. So it's this is the leading edge. So that's the edge that I'm going to put right over the line there. First I'm going to get some glue on it. Make sure that that's flat and straight. You just have to just lap that edge of the plastic like that. And that's all it has to stick to. And so we're going to let that dry now. I'm actually going to just leave it right where it is. Okay, you can see that it's picking up here, so it is stuck to it. That's the advantage of this type of glue. It sticks very quickly. It takes a little while to dry, but that's what we're going to do next, is let it dry. This is dried a little bit. There's still a bow to the leading edge, and I'm hoping that that'll come out when we get the top wet with the glue. If not, we'll deal with it somehow. Okay, so I'm going to get some glue going on the top here, and this is just the top of the leading edge. You're not trying to coat any of the ribs yet. Okay. And look at that. I think it did. It straightened out the leading edge. We got lucky. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this back over that. We're just doing one section at a time. So now we're on the top of the leading edge. You don't have to get all the tiny little wrinkles out, just the big wrinkles. And what we want to do is make sure that the plastic conforms to the shape of the leading edge. That's the main thing that we're after right now. Okay, so I'm going to pick this up, and I'm going to pull behind the main center rib and pull the plastic over each rib and try to smooth that out. We want to make sure that we get that sharp edge back on the leading edge, because that's what's going to cut through the air. And we can't have a bubble of plastic in the way. It'll deform the airfoil, and it won't work very efficiently. And the airplane won't fly as long, and that's what we're after. These are duration events, they call them. The longer they're in the air, the higher you place. Okay, so I'm just smoothing that out, making sure that it stays tight to the leading edge and the sharp part of the leading edge. Pulling back on the plastic back here. Do it carefully so you don't break anything. There we go. Okay, and I think I'm going to set that aside, let that dry, and we'll go right into the stabilizer. And that's sticking pretty well now, and it's not too distorted. And what we're going to do with this one, we're just going to let that hold on the front. We're going to actually go right to coating the ribs. And start with the center one. And once you got that, then you can coat the trailing edge. And we're just going to coat the top of the trailing edge at this point. And then we'll end up trimming the plastic right along this back edge here. Okay, and I'm going to try to remove a little bit of that with my finger. Doesn't have to be globbed on, it just has to be wet enough to grab the plastic and hold it. So I'm wiping some of it away actually. Okay, it's ready to go. Now watch this. You just flip this over. It's actually good that it's sticking to the table. Try to flatten that out as much as you can, and then just rock that into the plastic. There you go. And there's enough on that trailing edge that it should stick, and then I'll be able to pick this up and finish pressing it down over the ribs primarily. There we go. And so you get right behind the rib and you kind of just grab the plastic and pull, kind of rotate backwards like that. Make sure it sticks to the rib. And especially the end ribs, those are important. And then last but not least is the trailing edge. So we'll get that to stick on the trailing edge. So that's not too painful. And now I'm smoothing it out over the trailing edge so that it sticks. Okay, now we have to let that dry before we do any trimming on it. And let's see how the wing is doing. Start with the center rib. Just a little bit on the sliced ribs is fine. They just have to hold it in place to keep it from moving side to side. But the main ones are the ends, where it has to be sealed all the way along that rib, all the way up to the leading edge, and of course on the center rib as well. And we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to put it at the top of the trailing edge, get the glue on there. We'll be able to trim it off the back of that sharp edge. Remove a little bit of the excess glue like that. Okay, let's get this straightened out in front. And we'll grab that and pull it over the top and pick it up. And we're going to straighten it out over the center rib first. Smooth that out on the trailing edge. Come over to the side here. You're just going for getting rid of the big wrinkles. Since we got that to adhere on the front, we're pretty much home free. Any of these wrinkles back here are not a big deal. But you can work at straightening them out. You don't want to put the covering on very tight. In indoor modeling, they say wrinkles are beautiful. So just work it, and you can see that the glue doesn't stick immediately, or it still stays wet enough that you can kind of manipulate this as you go. Get over on this side here. So we're going to let that dry now, and then we'll trim those pieces. You can see that it's not quite dry. When it's finally dry, that'll flatten out. But we're going to trim this along the back edge and start here. And again, like we did with the tissue, go slowly and just be sure that you don't cut into the wood. Keep moving your hand, the hand that's behind, kind of catch up with it like that. And I'm kind of pulling out on the plastic a little bit as I go. And we're going to do the same thing over the rib, or the end of the rib, I should say. Cut through there. And this will have to kind of roll as we go. You're cutting right where it's in contact with the cutting board. And let the rib roll like that. There we go. All the way to the front. Okay, that just has to dry more completely. And we'll get this stabilizer trimmed up. Start with the trailing edge. Rolled right up. Okay, there it is. Covered wing, covered stabilizer. This is called ultrafilm, and you will save maybe a gram in the covering of your model if you use this film. It's a little bit more difficult to use. It's staticky. If I hold it up, you can see it kind of grabs onto itself. One of the things you can do is lightly spray the air around it and kind of mist it on the sides like that. Don't spray it directly if you can. And then that relieves some of the static charge and allows you to straighten it out, flatten it out. The other thing that I like to do is control this edge by putting a piece of invisible tape or transparent tape on it. And this stabilizes this edge and gives you a little bit more control over it. And then what you do is you could paint your stabilizer, especially if you're using a flat stabilizer, paint that with contact cement and flip it over and hold it down and then trim that off later. What we need to do is adhere the rails, and then those are what receive the rubber bands and hold the wing onto the fuselage. These have already been single glued, so we're now going to do the second gluing on them. And you can thin that out quite a bit, and it'll stick right away. Otherwise, if you put too thick a glue layer on here, you'll be working late into the night. Okay, so these go on the front ones. The front has a little bit higher shape to accommodate the shape of the front of the rib, like that. And then the other one is on the other side. And before you really stick these down, make sure that you double check and you see that these two are beveled toward each other like that. That's so you can roll that rubber band over those. If these were square, there's no way that you could roll those rubber bands over. Or if they're even turned out, that'd even be worse. So make sure that those are beveled inwards. And then you're just holding it right where the glue is. And just hold that for a couple of minutes. And I think it's sticking now so that I can do the back ones. And so let's get some glue on there. Again, not too much. There we go. Push it up snug to the trailing edge, and then make sure that the tops of these conform, or at least very close to the top of the rib in the back. Okay, and then hold that firmly. You can put a piece of fuselage size stock underneath. You don't want to get any glue on this. There. And then you have something that you can press against top and bottom on the rails, and the bottom is not going to be pinched together very firmly. Check every couple of seconds to make sure that it's not stuck with glue. So I'm sliding this back and forth. You see that? You don't want this to stick to the rails. I think there's no glue on it, so I can freely press on this a little bit more. And I'm going to pull this out now and let those dry. These have already been pre-glued. These are the end plates, and they go on the ends of the ribs here. So let's get a little more glue there, and just along the bottom edge of the end plate. Like that. And wipe off the excess so it sticks right away. And this one goes on this side because this is forward and it matches the depth of the rib on the outside. So what I do is I'm pulling these back a little bit. Some of the leading edge is going to stick out beyond the end rib. So I'm going to start in the back like this. Make sure that it matches the back. And when it sticks a little bit, then I'm going to pick it up and hold it and keep pressing along the bottom piece of the end plate, and also the little triangle brace. That's the purpose of that, is to help the end plate stay vertical. Okay, I think that's sticking. Okay, let's do the other side. It's all lined up. It's flush with the bottom of the rib, and so I'm just pressing to make sure it sticks all the way along. Okay, I think that's sticking well enough that I can just set it aside and let that dry. We're going to do some double gluing now, and then we're going to take this and just roll that into the glue like that, and make sure we get a little bit of that glue that's in the middle stuck to the top of the tail boom. I think I just broke one of those ribs. Okay, we can repair that. You can put a little glue where the break is, and then you can use another little piece of bond paper as a reinforcement on the side. So things happen, right? So let's cut a little tiny piece like that, and just needs a little bit of reinforcement on the side there. So watch this, just pick this up and just lay it into the glue that's on the side of that rib, and when it dries it'll be good as new. Okay, so we're going to wipe off the excess glue, let that dry, and wipe off the excess glue on here and let that dry, and then we'll do the second gluing on that. While we're letting it dry, what we're going to also do is get the left turn angle on the tail boom. This is going to adhere back here, but we need a little bit of an angle cut into or sanded into this side so that it gives us that left turn. You see that? It has to be more like that. And I've got another angle already measured on here, and I've also marked, this is the part of the tail boom that's going to get sanded down. I put a little black mark on there so I make sure that I'm sanding or cutting on the right side. So I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to line this up with the right edge of this form, and you can see that there's a line drawn on here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark that where the line comes through on the front and where it appears on the side is right about here. So here's the angle that I'm going to sand into it. Okay, if you want to use a straight edge, you can do that. So I'm just going to look at that, take that corner off. I'm going to hold this square so I don't end up with a compound angle. I'm just going to hold this square. Some of my fingertips are sticking down below that, and I'm matching that angle and just going to sand it till that line gets bitten into a little bit. There we go. I think that's about it. And then you can check the end. If that's even, that means you haven't turned it this way either. Okay? So that looks like the right angle, and I'm just going to do a check here. And so then that gets glued on there, and that has enough turn in it that we won't have to rely on the rudder tab necessarily. In fact, we can test fly this first before putting the rudder tabs on and add them only if necessary. Or you can put them on and take them off if they stay straight during the flight pattern that you like. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to double glue this area here as well. And this is also going to get one more angle. This right now is fairly straight. This is going to end up with a little bit of, this is what we call décollage. It's the difference between the angle of the stabilizer and the angle of the wing. The wing will be flat on the fuselage, so this is going to end up being tilted up a little bit. How much? Well, 3/16 of an inch. Everything's going to sit down on the table, and with this 3/16 jig, that's going to give us enough difference between the wing and the stabilizer that it'll keep the wing at the right angle for flying. Okay? If they're both even, there's a danger that it'll just go into a long dive like that. So we have to have a little bit of a difference between the stabilizer and the wing. So we'll let that dry. Okay, we're ready for the double gluing of the tail boom. And I always like to double check, make sure I get it on the correct side. Okay, so I go like that, and now I know which side the glue is going to get put on. So just a little bit. Remember, there's already plenty of glue on here, and it's dry. We're just going to reactivate it. There we go. And so I try to wipe all of it off so it's just a very thin layer. It's not even glossy. It's just, it's going to stick very aggressively there. Okay, so then I'm going to push this forward, and I'm on top of the décollage jig, as we call it, and that's going to determine that angle. This has to be on the table, and this has to be on the table. So now that I've got that angle set, I'm going to pick it up and just hold it for a couple of minutes, or a minute, till it sets long enough that I can put it down and let it dry. Now what we're going to do is we're going to adhere the stabilizer to the top of the tail boom. Again, just a little bit of glue to reactivate the initial gluing, like that. And kind of a key for you is as you're rubbing it like this, you can feel it gets very aggressive and sticky. You can feel it like that. Okay, so then we're going to turn this over, and this is awkward. It's has to be done up in the air like this. And so I grab the center rib, pull this back, make sure that the rib is forward where it needs to be. And now I'm pushing, I got my thumbnail, I have my thumbnail underneath the tail boom, and I'm putting a little bit of pressure back here on the rib where it's safe to push down on it. I'm going to do the same thing up front, like that. And it's just wherever it finds that correct angle and flattens out. I'm also going to do a little pinch in the middle here, so where that glue in the middle of the compression rib was, it will stick to the top of the tail boom. Okay, and now I'm going to pull here. I need another hand. Now there we go. Get my thumbnail under there. There we go. Now I'm holding it. I'm just going to hold that for a little bit. Okay, this is dried for a while, but I want to reinforce that joint because the last thing you need is a stabilizer popping off in mid-flight. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the back of this razor blade, and these are just a couple of very small rectangular strips of bond paper. I'm going to press it in the middle, and what it does is it creates a little flex joint there right in the middle. It makes it much easier to press into the corners where we're going to put them, which is right here and here. So that's why I'm going to put some glue, just a little bit. Whoops, too much. So you can lift some of it off with the needle, or spread it out a little bit like that. And then same up front. I think just doing these reinforcing tabs on one side is going to take care of that. Just a little extra insurance that the stabilizer stays on. And then you just pick this up like this and push it right into the corner like that, and it flexes right where we bent it, and it just stays put. Okay, here we go again, right up on the front one, right there. Tap, make sure that the tabs are sticking, and there it is, okay? I'm going to set this down so that you can see where they are, here and over here. I'm going to show you a few things that I've done with this model that are different from the other models. This is using a flat stabilizer, does not have any curved ribs. I recommend this because this is easier to build and it's lighter, also easier to cover. Be sure you use the gussets because that'll hold those otherwise kind of iffy joints together. If you take a look at this center rib here, I've removed some of that material. I used a sharp X-Acto knife and open that up. That's just to lose a little bit of the weight. It doesn't need a lot of strength there. That rib is just holding the wing on and also holding the covering material up in position. This is rubber strip, and you want to try to buy it in a variety of thicknesses from 1/8 inch, which is 125 thousandths, down to maybe 83, 85 thousandths. That's measuring the thickness of the rubber. The requirements for 2010 are that the motor weigh no more than 1.5 grams. I've got this set up on a scale just to show you how you're going to cut this, but this is actually an analog scale and it's not sensitive enough. What you need instead is the digital version of this hanging scale. Okay, and what you do is I'm going to hold this end of it like this, and as I let it down, you can see that it weighs a little bit more, okay? And you pull it back up. I'm not reading this because it's not the right scale, but when I get to 1.6 grams, then I'll cut it right here, like that. Check it, make sure it's still at 1.6 grams, because you're going to take about 1/10 of a gram off, maybe a little less than that, 1.55, something like that, okay? So once you get that weighed, then you're going to tie the knot in this, and the first knot is an overhand knot, and you just wrap it around your finger like this, tuck those two ends under like that, and don't pull tight just yet. You want to moisten that first with either water like that or saliva. Saliva works great. It's actually a little slipperier than the water, so I'm going to do that. Moisten it a little bit, and then I'm going to pull slowly. Don't pull fast because you'll tear the motor. So I'm going to pull that a little bit more so it tightens up, and then with the remaining two ends I'm going to tie a square knot, and I hold one end like that and the free end moves around over like that. Pull that one tight, and now this one, this free end that's on the right, goes behind that one and has to go through. Try it again. This one goes behind that one like that, and then you pull that tight, and now you have a knot that stops the slipping of the original overhand knot. And you can tighten it up a little bit more if you want. You can pull on these two ends like that. Do it carefully and slowly. There you go. and it just tightened up that knot on the very end. Then here's where you're going to remove that extra weight so that the motor will hopefully weigh no more than 1.5 grams. I have a Ziploc bag here, and what I've done is I've put in some of this Armor All. That's going to help us lube the motor, and an unlubed motor is like running a car engine without oil. You got to have lube on it. And you don't want to use any kind of oil. It has to be some kind of water-based lubricant. Some people have used green soap in the past. They have formulas that they can sell also, but this works just fine. This is Armor All. And what I usually do is I let it dry on there, and it still stays very slippery. I'm going to take a measurement of this motor like that on the end, and that looks like 11.5 inches. That's close enough measurement. Okay, and I'm going to loop this over something. It could be a doorknob or anything like that. And I'm going to take my trusty old winder. This is a 16-to-1. This is a 10-to-1 winder. You can use that. These are available at hobby stores. You want a geared winder because winding these by hand it's difficult and takes too long. Okay, so I'm going to stretch the motor, and I am going to note that that was an 11.5-inch motor, and I'm going to wind it until it breaks. Okay, so I'm going to give it a good stretch and start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. 60, I want to remember that number. It's getting hard, it's getting ready to break, so that's 60, 61, 62, 63, 70, 71, 72, 75, 76, 77, 78, 78, we'll call that 78, okay? Look at it run around. Okay, so that's an 11.5-inch motor. 78 times 16 is the ratio of the geared winder, and that gives us 1,248 divided by 11.5, which is the length of the motor. That gives us 108 turns per inch is the maximum number of turns that will take from a brand new lubed motor. In general, you don't want to wind any more than probably a maximum of 82% of that. So if you multiply that times 0.82, you don't want to wind up more than 88 turns per inch on this particular brand of rubber and this particular width of rubber. This is 110, like the one that I just broke. So 9-inch at 110, if we multiply that times that 88 figure, I don't want to wind it more than 9 times 88. So I don't want to wind it more than 792 turns. So on a 10-to-1 winder, that would be 79 turns on this. We're going to assemble the plane now. I'm going to hold the fuselage like this. The easiest way to get the wing on is just to put the front rails on like that, and then hold those and slide the other ones down over the fuselage like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is slide these orthodontic rubber bands over the rails, front and back, and that's going to hold the wing on. Stability is another way of saying it, is a way that you guarantee yourself a very consistent flight pattern. Longitudinal stability has to do with where the center of gravity is, and if I put my fingers under the film here like this and balance that, that shows that the center of gravity with the motor on, you want to do this with the motor on, is within the range of 1/3 to 2/3 back. That's the ideal for this type of model. You can change that with this particular design by sliding this forward, and if you go like that and rebalance it, that's getting pretty far back in the chord of the wing. That's this length here. If the center of gravity is back too far, it makes some of these other adjustments difficult to trim. Now, if you push it back here, you're actually increasing the stability, but you don't want to increase it too much because then it makes these a lot less effective because you're shortening this lever here. Sometimes it'll take a lot more deflection to get it to even fly in a level attitude. So do something in between here. On the plans, I have the center of gravity right in the middle. As you're playing with this and experimenting for the longest flights, use the range of center of gravity between here and here, between 1/3 and 2/3 back. If you want to see more about stability, you can download the file that is on the DVD, and I'll go into more detail with hints and tips on construction and flying. Okay, my partner over there is going to start winding in a minute, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to angle this up like that, protecting the wing in case the motor breaks. You don't want that rubber to go through your wing. So you put your hand like this. You're not touching the motor at all. You're just putting it there for protection in case it breaks, okay? So that's the holding position for winding, and now I'm going to show you the winder's position. Okay, now I'm going to wind for my friend there, and I'm going to hook up the motor. You want the knot in the back, because if it's anywhere besides the back, it can stop or slow down the unwinding when the plane's in flight. So I put my hands like this over the winder so I don't accidentally let go. With this much tension on that motor, that would go right through the wing. Okay, so then I'm starting to wind here, and you count 1 for every rotation here. And this is a 10-to-1 winder, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 100 turns. So you can see the advantage of having a winder. I want to show you how to safely put the motor on without cutting it. The little hook here on the SIG prop has some sharp edges on it, and you want to avoid pulling this through. You don't want to just stick this on and just pull it through there. So what you do is you hook it over the shaft of the prop, and you stretch it thin like this, and then you just slowly feed it into that loop like that. And then you pinch it there like that, and you want the knot at the end. So now what we're going to do is hook this up onto the winder. My friend's going to wind for me, and I'm going to hold my hand like this, and he has his hand in the proper position so that he's not going to end up letting go of the winder. Give yourself a little bit of room here. This is about 1 inch, and you're going to lose some turns there, but that's okay. The other thing is to point your fingers toward the winder. Don't grab it like this, because then it'll make it very awkward if the loop's on the inside of your finger there. So pinch it like this. Give yourself plenty of room so that you have a decent sized loop that you can hook up on the rear motor hook, okay? So go ahead and let go of the winder. So he's letting go of the winder, and go ahead and grab it again. And we're doing this because the same thing happens here. Sometimes these winders have a very sharp edge on there, and you don't want to nick the motor, because that's going to really shorten the life of the motor. So now I'm going to just take that loop and loop it over the rear motor hook like that. Slowly let it go like that, and it is ready to fly. One of the things that's required in the competition is a flight log. For competition, you need to record at least 10 test flights and then 6 parameters describing different things like the number of turns and so on. So some of those things are number of turns, launch torque, the remaining turns that are left on the motor when it lands, the flight time, and then other notes. To know what the torque is at launch, you'll need a torque meter, and that's something that's beyond the scope of this particular film. But when you get to those contests, you can talk to other modelers about that. That's what you record, and you have to have 10 flights recorded, so keep that with you when you're flying, and then you can record all those parameters. Then you can enter that when you're entering your plane for inspection. You enter the flight log as well. The Science Olympiad events change from year to year. Next year, I understand they're going to be doing the helicopter event. And this is a free flight helicopter, typical of the weight range. I think this one weighs about 2 grams. The techniques used for building these and the balloon launch glider for the younger participants are the same. You use the same techniques for selecting the wood, stripping it, gluing together, using gussets, and the same covering techniques and materials. And I want to show you how this one flies. Take a look. Okay, I want to describe some of the flight attitudes that a plane can take. An airplane that stalls is going along like this, and maybe the nose will drop. If that happens once or twice during the whole flight, it means it's probably convection currents. But if it happens repeatedly at the beginning of the flight or anytime during the flight, then you're going to need to make an adjustment in the elevator tab here. So you need to bend that down just a little bit. Okay, so try to even that out. The attitude you want the plane to fly at is just before stall, because then it's putting the maximum pressure, back pressure on the propeller, so it's kind of hanging on the prop, so to speak. So if the airplane's flying too fast, it's probably going to circle around you and not climb. That indicates that it's actually in a dive, but the forces are kind of balanced between the lift and the extra power that it has at the beginning of the flight and the actual diving down. You won't usually see it dive down. If that's the case, then of course you need to add a little bit of up elevator. If the airplane's flying around at the same height, there's a couple of things that may be wrong. It may be that you need to adjust the elevator to raise the nose a little bit in flight, or it may be underpowered. So you'll need to try a heavier motor on it, and you just have to bite the bullet, because that means you're going to get fewer turns on that rubber, but at least it'll climb. The other thing is, if it lands with too many turns, like more than 100 turns or so, that means you need to use a thicker motor, a shorter, thicker motor as well, because otherwise you're just wasting the energy that you're putting into the piece. For competition, you probably want to build a couple of models in case one of them breaks. You're not going to have time during competition to repair that. So it's a good idea to have two, and I have two of these here. They're almost identical. The only difference between them is this one has a rudder tab and elevator tab on it, and this one doesn't. And it may not need it, depending on how these angles have been set up. So that's how you build an indoor model airplane. And here's how you fly it. Let go of the propeller, let the propeller spin, and give it a gentle push forward. Thank you for joining me, and happy flying, and most of all, happy landings.